Every morning I'd put on my cheap uniform and walk into that mansion as the caregiver. They'd look right through me, just another poor woman who needed their money. What they didn't see was the woman who, 40 years ago, wore designer suits and signed million-dollar contracts. The woman who built a company from nothing with their dying mother. I'd given it all up for love. But now, watching them fight over her money, treating me like I was beneath them, I realized my old partner had called me back for one final deal, to show her children exactly who they'd become. And trust me, the price they'd pay was higher than any of us imagined. My name is Margaret, and I need to tell you about the 3 months that changed everything, not just for me, but for a family who thought they knew exactly who I was. It started with a phone call I never expected. After 40 years of silence, Catherine's voice came through my phone like a ghost from another lifetime. "Margaret," she said, her words slow and careful, weighted with something I couldn't quite name yet. "I need your help. Not as a friend. As an employee?" I almost laughed. Catherine Whitmore asking me to be her employee? The same Catherine who used to argue with me until 3 in the morning over business strategies. Who split profits 50-50? Who shook hands with me when we signed our first million-dollar deal in 1983? But something in her voice stopped me from making that joke. There was a plan there, hidden beneath the formal request. "I'm dying, Margaret," she continued. "Stage 4. 6 months if I'm lucky, and I need to know something before I go. I need to know if my children deserve what I've built, or if they've become the kind of people who would destroy it." That's when she told me her plan. A plan so calculated, so perfectly designed, it could have come straight from one of our old boardroom strategies. I would come to her house as a caregiver, a stranger, someone hired through an agency. I would wear a cheap uniform, arrive in an old car, and play the role of someone desperate for work. And then I would watch. Watch how her family treated someone they perceived as powerless. Watch how they behaved when they thought no one important was looking. "Record everything," Catherine said. "Every word, every action, every moment. Because at the end of 3 months, I'm going to decide if they get anything at all. And Margaret, I have a feeling I'm going to need evidence for what comes next." The backstory you need to understand is this. 40 years ago, Catherine and I were partners in every sense of the word. We met in 1981 at a business seminar where they'd invited us as tokens, 2 women in a room full of men who didn't think we belonged. We bonded over shared rejection letters, over doors slammed in our faces, over investors who'd look at our business plan and say, "This is impressive work, ladies. Did your husbands help you write this?" We started with nothing. A shared office that was actually Catherine's basement. A single typewriter we'd take turns using. But we had something those men didn't have. We had to be twice as good just to be considered half as competent. So we became 4 times better than anyone else. By 1985, we'd built a consulting firm that was generating 7 figures annually. By 1989, we were the go-to strategic advisors for 3 Fortune 500 companies. But then I met James, sweet, kind James, who loved me completely and who asked me to choose, not because he was controlling, but because he wanted to start a family and he was honest about needing a partner who could be present. Catherine and I had a tearful dinner where we split everything 50-50. She bought out my half of the company over 5 years. We promised to stay friends. We didn't. Life got in the way. I got married, had 2 kids, watched them grow up. Catherine expanded the business, eventually selling it for $42 million in 2005. I heard about it through a newspaper article. I sent her a congratulations card. She never responded. 40 years of silence, broken only by that one phone call 3 months ago. So when I walked up the marble steps of the Whitmore mansion on that first Monday morning in my cheap polyester uniform, carrying a worn canvas bag, I was stepping into something far bigger than a simple caregiving job. I was walking into a test, and I had no idea how badly they were going to fail it. The door was answered by a woman in her late 40s, thin in that expensive way that comes from personal trainers and carefully managed diets. Vanessa, Catherine's daughter-in-law. She looked me up and down with an expression I'd seen before. The look people give something they've purchased that turned out to be lower quality than expected. "You're the caregiver?" she asked, not moving from the doorway. "Yes, ma'am." "Margaret Wilson." I'd taken my husband's last name, buried my maiden name so deep that not even a Google search would connect me to Catherine's old partner. I expected someone younger. She finally stepped aside. "My mother-in-law specifically requested someone experienced, but I have to tell you, we've had problems with caregivers stealing before. So we'll be watching you very carefully." That was the first insult, delivered before I'd even crossed the threshold. The mansion was exactly what you'd expect. Grand staircase, crystal chandelier, walls lined with expensive art. But all I could see were the details Catherine and I used to joke about when we were planning our dream offices. "One day," she used to say, "I'm going to have a chandelier so big it needs its own insurance policy." She'd gotten her wish. Vanessa led me through the house like I was a servant being shown the service passages. "Mrs. Whitmore's room is upstairs. Second door on the right. You are not to enter any other rooms without permission. You eat in the kitchen after the family is done. Your quarters are the small room off the kitchen, not the guest suite, obviously. Someone like you wouldn't be comfortable there anyway." Someone like you. I filed that phrase away in my mental recordings, even though the actual recorder hidden in my uniform pocket was already capturing everything. "Someone like you," she'd said, as if my worth could be measured by my cheap clothes and old car. Catherine's room was large, filled with afternoon sunlight. And there she was, my old partner, looking so much older than I remembered, lying in a hospital bed that seemed too big and too clinical for the elegant room around it. But when our eyes met, I saw the spark there. The same sharp intelligence that used to dissect business proposals in minutes. "You must be Margaret," she said in a weak voice, playing her part perfectly. "The agency sent you?" "Yes, Mrs. Whitmore, I'm here to take care of you." "Good. I hope you're better than the last one." She was lazy. Catherine's eyes twinkled slightly. The last caregiver had been perfectly competent, but this was part of the script. Make the family think I was replaceable, forgettable, just another in a series of hired help. That first week, I learned the family dynamics quickly. Richard, Catherine's only son, was 53 and ran a mid-level investment firm. Not particularly successful, but comfortable. He visited his mother once a day, always for exactly 15 minutes, always checking his phone at least 3 times during those 15 minutes. He looked at me like I was furniture. Vanessa was the real power in the relationship. She'd married Richard 30 years ago, and somewhere along the way, she'd decided that her mother-in-law's wealth was something she'd earned by proximity. She treated the mansion like it was already hers, rearranging furniture, redecorating rooms, hosting her book club in the library every Thursday without asking permission. And then there was Ashley, their 28-year-old daughter. Spoiled didn't even begin to cover it. She lived in the mansion's guest house, rent-free, working on what she called her lifestyle brand, an Instagram account where she posted pictures of expensive brunches and designer handbags. She'd visit her grandmother maybe twice a week, always with her phone out, always positioning Catherine in the frame like she was a prop. "Grandmother looks so frail today," Ashley said once while photographing Catherine. She didn't say it to Catherine. She said it to her phone camera, sending thoughts and prayers. Heart emoji. Heart emoji. The moment that made me understand exactly why Catherine had called me happened on day 4. I was helping Catherine eat her lunch. She could feed herself perfectly fine, but we were maintaining the fiction that she was weaker than she really was, when Vanessa walked in with her interior designer. No, Philip, you're not understanding me," Vanessa was saying, gesturing around the room like Catherine and I weren't there. "When we redo this room, I want complete transformation. All this old furniture needs to go. I'm thinking modern, minimalist, maybe Scandinavian-inspired. The hospital bed obviously won't be here anymore, so we'll have much more space." The interior designer looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Whitmore, perhaps we should discuss this when..." "When what?" "When she's not here to hear it?" Vanessa laughed. "Philip, she's dying. Everyone knows it. There's no point in pretending." Besides, she's so medicated half the time, she probably doesn't even understand what we're saying anyway. I felt Catherine's hand tighten on mine. Just slightly. A warning to stay in character. I kept my face neutral, kept spooning soup, kept playing the role of the caregiver who'd seen this 1,000 times before and had learned not to react. But inside I was burning. That was the moment I understood that this wasn't just about business wisdom or inheritance planning. This was personal. This was a mother watching her own family treat her death like an inconvenient waiting period before they could cash in. That night, after the family was asleep, Catherine and I had our first real conversation in 40 years. I locked the bedroom door, turned off the baby monitor they used to listen in, and pulled up a chair next to her bed. "Well?" she asked, her weak voice suddenly strong again. "What do you think so far, partner?" Partner? That word hit me harder than I expected. "I think," I said carefully, "that your son has forgotten what it's like to be grateful. Your daughter-in-law has forgotten that this isn't her house. And your granddaughter has forgotten that people aren't Instagram content." Catherine nodded slowly. 3 months, Margaret? I'm giving them 3 months to prove me wrong. 3 months to show me one genuine moment of care that isn't about my money. Do you think they'll manage it? I thought about Vanessa discussing redecorating while her mother-in-law was still in the room. I thought about Richard's 15-minute visits. I thought about Ashley's photo op prayers. "No," I said honestly. "I don't think they will." "Good," Catherine said and smiled. It was her old smile, the one she used to get when she'd landed a difficult client. "Then let's give them enough rope to hang themselves." The recordings were damning from the start, but they got worse as the weeks went on. By week 2, the family had gotten comfortable with my presence in that way people do with servants. I became invisible to them. They'd have entire conversations about Catherine's assets right in front of me, as if I was a lamp or a piece of furniture. "The main issue," Richard said to Vanessa one evening as I was giving Catherine her dinner, "is that mother set up these ridiculous trusts. Everything's tied up until she dies, and even then there are conditions." "What kind of conditions?" Vanessa asked, flipping through a magazine. "She has to approve the executor, which means we need to stay on her good side until the end." Richard glanced at his mother with what might have been frustration or might have been something darker. "How much longer do the doctors say?" 6 months. Maybe less. Vanessa didn't look up from her magazine. "We can manage to be nice for 6 months. That conversation was recorded, time-stamped, saved to 3 separate, encrypted cloud accounts. The small cruelties piled up like snowfall, individually almost invisible, collectively suffocating. Vanessa started serving family dinners at 6 p.m. and telling me I could eat the leftovers at 8 p.m., after I'd finished giving Catherine her evening medications. The leftovers were always cold, sometimes spoiled. "If you don't like it," Vanessa said when I politely mentioned that the chicken seemed off, "you're welcome to bring your own food." "Though I suppose on what we're paying you, that's probably difficult, isn't it?" I smiled and said nothing. The recorder captured every word. Ashley was perhaps the worst, because her cruelty came wrapped in the language of wellness and self-care. She'd post long Instagram captions about the burden of caring for aging family members, and the emotional labor of watching a loved one decline. She'd photograph herself crying. Actual tears. Impressively produced, with captions like, "Today was so hard." Grandmother barely recognized me. This was a lie. Catherine's mind was sharp as ever. But Ashley would walk into the room, spend 3 minutes, ask no questions about Catherine's actual well-being, take selfies with her grandmother carefully positioned in the blurred background, and leave. The tears came later, for the camera. Week 6 brought the conversation I'd been waiting for. Late at night, Catherine asked me, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you'd stayed? If we'd kept building together?" I'd thought about it. Of course I had. Sometimes, I admitted. But I got something you didn't get. I got to watch my kids grow up. I got to have a marriage that lasted 40 years. I got to have ordinary happiness. And I got a mansion and a family that's counting down the days until I die so they can sell it, Catherine said. There was no self-pity in her voice, just observation. I'm not sure which of us made the better choice, Margaret. Maybe neither of us did, I said. Maybe we both just made the choice that was right for us at the time. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm changing my will tomorrow. Attorney's coming at 2 p.m. Vanessa will have kittens when she finds out. What are you changing it to? Catherine smiled. You'll see. The attorney visit was spectacular theater. Catherine played her part perfectly, the confused elderly woman, asking the same questions multiple times, seeming uncertain about details. Vanessa hovered throughout the entire meeting, clearly trying to overhear without seeming like she was overhearing. After the attorney left, Vanessa came into Catherine's room with a smile so fake it could have been plastic. Mother Catherine, I couldn't help but notice you had legal visitors today. Is everything all right? Just updating some paperwork, Catherine said vaguely. Don't worry about it, dear. Of course, of course. But, if there's anything you need to discuss about your estate planning, Richard and I are always here. We have your best interests at heart. Vanessa's eyes were calculating. You trust us, don't you? Catherine looked at her daughter-in-law for a long moment. Then she said, with perfect innocence, Of course I trust you, Vanessa. You've never given me any reason not to. It was the most savage lie I'd ever heard delivered with such sweetness. Week 8 brought escalation. Vanessa, clearly frustrated by her inability to control Catherine's legal affairs, started taking it out on me. The service portions at dinner got smaller. The list of chores got longer. The criticisms got louder. This floor isn't clean enough, she'd say about floors I'd just scrubbed. My mother-in-law's pillows aren't fluffed properly. Are you incompetent or just lazy? I took it all silently. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment of deliberate disrespect. And I recorded every single word. Richard, emboldened by his wife, started treating me like I was intellectually inferior. He'd explain simple concepts to me in that slow, loud voice people use when they think someone is stupid. Margaret, do you understand what 6 p.m. means? It means when the big hand and the little hand. I understand time, Mr. Whitmore, I said quietly. Do you? Because you were 3 minutes late with Mother's evening pills yesterday. 3 minutes. I'd been delayed because Ashley had left her gym bag in the doorway and I'd tripped over it. But Richard didn't want explanations. He wanted someone to feel superior to. The recordings were devastating. Hours of footage showing exactly who these people were when they thought no one important was watching. But Catherine wanted more. She wanted to see if they were capable of even one moment of genuine humanity. Week 10, she gave them a chance. She had me call a family meeting and tell them she wanted to discuss something important. Richard, Vanessa, and Ashley all gathered in her bedroom, their faces showing various degrees of fake concern and real anticipation. I've been thinking about my legacy, Catherine said weakly. About what I want to leave behind. And I realize I don't actually know what you'd do with it. Richard, if you inherited everything tomorrow, what would you do? Richard launched into a practiced speech about responsible investment and preserving wealth and honoring your memory. It was polished, professional, completely devoid of emotion. And Vanessa? What about you? I'd make sure this house becomes what it deserves to be, Vanessa said. A showcase. Somewhere we could host important events, build our social standing. Honor your memory through community engagement. Ashley? The granddaughter didn't even pretend. I'd probably sell the house and invest in my brand, grandmother. No offense, but your generation's approach to wealth is kind of outdated. I could turn this into real influence. Not one of them asked Catherine what she wanted. Not one of them asked about her wishes, her dreams, her hopes for how her legacy might help others. They'd turned an invitation to share their values into a shopping list for her assets. Catherine thanked them and dismissed them. After they left, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. Real tears this time, not Ashley's performative ones. I gave them every chance, she whispered. Every single chance to be better than this. I know, I said, holding her hand. The will reading is in 2 weeks. Are we ready? I thought about the hours of recordings. The documented abuse, the financial records showing exactly how little they'd contributed to her care compared to how much they'd spent planning for her death. Yes, I said. We're ready. The final 2 weeks were the hardest because I knew what was coming and they didn't. Vanessa increased her cruelty, perhaps sensing that her window of having to manage me was closing soon. She started having her friends over for lunch and they'd make comments about me within my hearing. It must be so difficult, one of them said, having strangers in your house all the time. Especially ones from, well, different backgrounds. You have to watch them constantly, Vanessa agreed. I had to start locking up the good silver. I'd never touched their silver, but the accusation hung there, recorded for posterity. Richard stopped paying me on time. My paycheck, which was supposed to come every Friday, started arriving on Monday, then Tuesday, then whenever I get around to it. It was a power play, a reminder that I was dependent on their charity. What he didn't know was that I didn't need their money. James and I had lived comfortably on his engineer's salary and my smart investments. I'd taken this job for free, really. The paycheck was just part of the costume. Ashley provided the final piece of evidence we needed. She posted an Instagram story, since deleted, but I'd screenshotted it, showing her shopping for expensive shoes with the caption, "Treating myself." Grandmother would want me to be happy. Life's too short to wait for inheritances. Though that wouldn't hurt either, Catherine saw it. Her face went through several expressions before settling on something that looked like peace. "That's it then," she said. "That's the final nail. Are you sure?" I asked her. "There's still time to what? To hope they'll magically become different people?" Catherine shook her head. "No, you and I both know that people show you who they are. I just needed to be absolutely certain before I did what I'm about to do." The will reading was scheduled for a Monday afternoon. Catherine had been very specific. She wanted it held in the main living room, not in a lawyer's office. She wanted to be there, in her wheelchair, weak but present. She wanted me there too. "Why does the caregiver need to be present?" Vanessa asked the attorney, her voice sharp with suspicion. "Mrs. Whitmore's request," the attorney said simply. "He was in on the plan, had been from the start. His name was Gregory Chen, and he'd worked with Catherine and me back in the old days. He knew exactly what was about to happen. They all gathered that Monday. Richard in his best suit, trying to look somber while his eyes darted around the room like he was already redecorating. Vanessa in elegant black mourning clothes for someone who wasn't dead yet. Ashley on her phone, probably planning her inheritance reveal post. I stood in the corner in my caregiver's uniform, holding Catherine's hand. Gregory opened his briefcase with deliberate slowness. "Before we begin," he said, "Mrs. Whitmore has asked me to share something with you. A video compilation." He set up a laptop, connected it to the large TV on the wall, and pressed play. The video started with Vanessa's voice from day 4. "When we redo this room, I want complete transformation. All this old furniture needs to go. She's dying. Everyone knows it. There's no point in pretending. Besides, she's so medicated half the time, she probably doesn't even understand what we're saying anyway." Richard's face went pale. Vanessa froze. Ashley looked up from her phone for the first time in 20 minutes. The video continued. Clip after clip, carefully edited together. Richard discussing staying on her good side until she died. Vanessa's comments about locking up the silver. Ashley's Instagram stories about waiting for inheritances. The cold dinners, the late paychecks, the casual cruelties. 10 minutes of their own words and actions, played back to them in high definition. When it ended, the silence in the room was absolute. "You recorded us," Vanessa finally said, her voice strangled. "That's illegal. You can't—" "Actually," Gregory interrupted smoothly, "Margaret was operating as a private caregiver in Mrs. Whitmore's own home, with Mrs. Whitmore's full knowledge and consent. No laws were broken. And even if there were some technical violations, I don't think you want to go to court to argue about it. Discovery would be extensive." "Mother," Richard turned to Catherine, his voice pleading. "Mother, I can explain." "We didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Catherine said. Her voice was weak but clear. "You meant every word. And that's what I needed to know. Gregory cleared his throat. Shall I read the will? Catherine nodded. The last will and testament of Catherine Elizabeth Whitmore, revised 3 weeks ago. To my son, Richard Whitmore, I leave the sum of $1, along with the recommendation that he learn what it means to truly work for something. To my daughter-in-law, Vanessa Whitmore, I leave nothing, as she has already taken far more than she ever gave. To my granddaughter, Ashley Whitmore, I leave my Instagram password so she can post one final story, that her grandmother died knowing exactly who she'd become. Ashley made a sound like a wounded animal. Vanessa stood up, her face contorted with rage. Richard just sat there, looking like he'd been hit with a hammer. The remainder of my estate, Gregory continued, including this house, all properties, all investments, and all liquid assets totaling approximately $47 million. I leave to Margaret Ellen Wilson, he paused for effect, who some of you may remember as Margaret Ellen Foster, my business partner of 40 years ago. The woman who helped me build everything you thought you were going to inherit. The explosion was immediate. Vanessa started screaming about fraud, about manipulation, about how the will would never stand up in court. Richard's face had gone from pale to red, his hands shaking. Ashley was crying, real tears this time, tears of loss and rage and disbelief. You can't do this, Vanessa was shouting. We're family. We have rights. That woman is nothing. She's just a... Choose your next words very carefully, Gregory said quietly, because everything you say is still being recorded. That shut her up. Catherine looked at her family, her son, her daughter-in-law, her granddaughter, with something that might have been sadness or might have been relief. I gave you 3 months, she said. 3 months to show me one moment of genuine love that wasn't about my money. One moment of treating someone with kindness when you thought it didn't matter. You failed completely. But she tricked us, Richard said. She came here under false pretenses. She came here as exactly what I hired her to be, Catherine interrupted. A caregiver. And while she was caring for me, I watched you show your true selves, not to someone powerful, not to someone you needed to impress, but to someone you thought was beneath you. And that, Richard, is what tells me everything I need to know about who you've become. Vanessa turned to me, her face twisted with hatred. You gold-digging bitch! This was your plan all along. You came here to steal... I didn't steal anything, I said quietly. This was the first time I'd spoken more than a few words in their presence, and my voice, my real voice, not the subservient caregiver's voice, made them all stop and stare. Catherine and I built a company together 40 years ago. She bought out my half fairly. I walked away to raise a family. She called me 3 months ago and asked me to help her with one final business decision, whether her children deserved her legacy. I looked at each of them in turn. You failed that evaluation. Not because Catherine set you up to fail, but because when you thought no one important was watching, you revealed exactly who you are. Gregory stood up. Now, regarding the legality of all this, I should mention that everything was reviewed by 3 separate law firms. The will is ironclad. However, Mrs. Whitmore has included one additional provision. He looked at Vanessa with something like satisfaction. If any member of the family contests this will, or attempts to drag Margaret's name through the media, or makes any move toward litigation, the full video archive, all 12 hours of it, will be released publicly. Every news station, every social media platform, every place where your friends and colleagues might see exactly how you treated someone you thought was powerless. The threat hung in the air. 12 hours of footage showing them at their absolute worst. It would be social suicide, professional disaster, public humiliation on an unimaginable scale. You're blackmailing us, Richard said, but his voice had lost its strength. I'm giving you a choice, Catherine corrected. Walk away with your dignity, what's left of it, or fight and lose everything, including your reputations. Vanessa looked like she wanted to kill someone. Ashley was still crying, mascara running down her face in black rivers. Richard just looked defeated, old, small. I want you all to leave now, Catherine said. Gregory will provide you with the details of what you're legally entitled to, which is almost nothing. You have 1 week to remove your personal belongings from the house. After that, anything remaining becomes Margaret's property. They stood there for another moment, clearly wanting to argue, to fight, to do something. But what could they do? The will was legal. The recordings were damning. Their only choice was to accept defeat or face public destruction. Finally, Vanessa grabbed her purse and stormed out. Ashley followed, still sobbing. Richard lingered for just a moment, looking at his mother with something that might have been remorse or might have been resentment. "Did you ever love me, Mother?" he asked quietly. Catherine's expression softened slightly. "Of course I did, Richard. I loved you enough to raise you, to educate you, to give you every advantage. But love doesn't mean letting you become someone cruel. You had every chance to be better. You chose not to take it." Richard left without another word, and then it was just the three of us, Catherine, Gregory, and me, in that enormous living room with its crystal chandelier and its polished floors and its memories of 3 months of carefully documented cruelty. "How do you feel?" Gregory asked Catherine. She thought about it. "Lighter," she finally said. "Like I've put down something heavy I've been carrying for too long." The next few weeks were chaos, of course. Vanessa tried to fight, hired lawyers, made threats, sent nasty letters. But every time she pushed, Gregory would remind her about the 12 hours of footage. Eventually, she backed down. They all did. Catherine lived for 2 more months after the will reading. Good months, peaceful months, where I took care of her as a friend, not as a caregiver playing a role. We talked about the old days, about the business we'd built, about the choices we'd made. "Do you regret it?" I asked her one afternoon. "Any of it?" "I regret that my son turned out the way he did," she said. "I regret that I didn't see it sooner. Or maybe that I saw it and ignored it because I wanted to believe better of him." "But the business? The money? The success?" She shook her head. "No, that was worth everything. And getting to share it with you again, even for just 3 months, that was the best investment I ever made." She died on a Tuesday morning in early spring, with me holding her hand. It was peaceful, gentle, everything her family's behavior hadn't been. The funeral was small. Richard and his family didn't come. I didn't blame them. How do you attend the funeral of someone who exposed exactly who you were? But Catherine's old colleagues came, people who remembered her brilliance, her dedication, her sharp wit. They didn't know about the caregiver sting operation. They just knew she'd been an extraordinary woman who'd built something from nothing. At the reception afterward, one of them asked me how I'd known Catherine. I could have lied, kept playing a role, but Catherine would have wanted the truth. "We were partners," I said. 40 years ago, we built a business together. Then I left to raise a family, and she kept building. And at the end, she brought me back for one final project." "What kind of project?" I smiled. "The most important business evaluation either of us ever conducted. We assessed whether her wealth should go to people who would waste it or to someone who understood its real value." They looked confused, but they didn't press. And I didn't explain further. Some stories are too complicated, too painful, too revealing to tell at funerals. The mansion sold for $8 million. I couldn't live there. Too many memories, too many ghosts. I donated most of Catherine's estate to a foundation we'd dreamed about 40 years ago. Scholarships for women in business, especially women who were told they didn't belong in boardrooms. I kept enough to retire comfortably, to help my own children and grandchildren, to live the life I'd chosen back in 1985 when I walked away from the business. But here's the thing I want you to understand. Whoever is listening to this, I didn't do this for the money. I already had enough. I didn't do it for revenge, though watching that family's faces when they realized what had happened had a certain satisfaction to it. I did it because Catherine asked me to, and because 40 years ago, we'd been partners in every sense of the word. Partners support each other. Partners show up when called, even decades later. Partners understand that sometimes the most valuable thing you can give someone isn't agreement or comfort. but honest assessment. And I did it because someone needed to show that family that there are consequences for treating people as less than human just because they appear to have less power than you. That the person you dismiss as just the caregiver might be the person who ultimately decides your fate. That cheap uniform I wore? It was just clothing. Underneath it was the same woman who'd signed million-dollar contracts, who'd negotiated with Fortune 500 executives, who'd built an empire with her best friend. The uniform didn't define me any more than their mansion defined them. Character isn't what you show people who can help you. Character is what you show people who can't fight back. And for 3 months they showed me, and more importantly, showed Catherine, exactly what their character was worth. The recordings are still in a secure storage facility. Vanessa knows they're there. Richard knows. Ashley knows. It's the sword hanging over their heads, the reminder that their cruelty was documented and could be revealed at any time. I'll never release them. Catherine wouldn't have wanted that. She got what she needed, confirmation that her decision was right, and justice that was served privately, quietly, in a way that gave them the choice to walk away with whatever dignity they had left. But they know I have them. And that knowledge, I think, is its own kind of justice. Last week I got a letter. No return address, but I recognized Vanessa's handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single sentence. You won. I didn't write back. Because it wasn't about winning. It was about showing up for someone who'd been my partner 4 decades ago, and honoring that partnership one final time. Catherine left me a letter too, to be opened after her death. It was short. Margaret, thank you for the 3 months, for the honesty, and for the reminder that real wealth isn't money. It's having someone who will show up when you call, even after 40 years of silence. I built an empire, but you built a life. I'm not sure which of us made the better choice, but I'm grateful we both got to see the results of the other's decision. Your partner in all things, see. I keep that letter in my desk drawer, next to the business plan we wrote together in 1981 on a manual typewriter in Catherine's basement. 2 pieces of paper separated by 4 decades, connected by partnership and trust. So when you think about wealth, about legacy, about what matters at the end of a life, remember this. The most expensive lesson Catherine's family ever received cost them $47 million. The most valuable thing I ever received was the knowledge that partnership, real partnership, survives everything else. And remember, when you're deciding how to treat someone you think is powerless, someone who can't help you, someone you'll never see again, remember that you don't know their story. You don't know who they used to be or who they still are underneath the uniform. That caregiver you dismiss might have once signed the contract you're trying to close. That janitor might have degrees you never earned. That person you're rude to might be the one who ultimately decides whether you deserve what you think you've earned. Treat people well not because they might be important someday, but because treating people well is what important people do. Catherine taught me that lesson 40 years ago, in a basement office with 1 typewriter and infinite ambition. And in her final 3 months, she taught her family the same lesson, at a cost of $47 million. I hope they learned it. I really do. Because the money doesn't matter nearly as much as the wisdom, but somehow I don't think they did. Did you like my story? I really want to know. What would you have done in Catherine's position? Would you have given your family the same test? What would you have done if you failed it? Let's meet in the comments. Which city are you listening from? If this story made you think, if it made you feel something, if it reminded you to treat every person with dignity regardless of their uniform or their title, please hit that like button. Your support helps me bring more stories like this to light. And before you go, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated? Have you ever been treated as less than because of how you looked or what job you had? Or have you ever caught yourself making assumptions about someone based on their appearance? Share your stories in the comments. I read every single one. On the screen, you'll find 2 more stories that I think you'll love. There's so much more on this channel. Stories about strength, about justice, about the complex realities of family and loyalty. Don't forget to subscribe, because trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, real power isn't about how much money you have. It's about how you treat people when you think no one important is watching, because someone is always watching. And sometimes, that someone is the person who'll decide your legacy. See you in the next story, with love and respect. Until then, treat people well,